Hi everyone, in this video we'll be looking into a game between Grandmaster Magnus Carlsen and Grandmaster Alireza Firouzja from the round 2 of Global Chess League between Team Magnus and Team Firouzja. Let's jump right into the game. Magnus Carlsen starting with the white pieces go for 1 d4. Firouzja replies with d5, c4, e6, knight to f3, knight to f6, knight to c3, c6, g3, d takes on c4, bishop to g2, knight on b to d7, a4, bishop to e7. Carlsen goes for castle. Firouzja also castles. a5, knight to d5, h4, bishop to b4, bishop to g5, knight on 7 to f6, q to c2, bishop takes on a5, e4, bishop takes on c3, b takes on c3, knight to e7, knight to e5, b5, q to c1, king to h8, q to f4, knight on e to g8, knight takes on c6, q to b6, q to d6, bishop to b7, e5, bishop takes on c6, bishop takes on c6, rook on a to d8, q to c5, q takes on c5, d takes on c5, h6, bishop to c1, knight to d5, bishop takes on b5, knight takes on c3, bishop takes on c4. So if you look at this position after 26 moves into the game, match is pretty much balanced. So the only right continuation for Alireza Firouzja is to play the knight to e7. But in the game, Firouzja continues with rook to d4 and this is a mistake. And after this move, Carlsen is having an advantage of +2. And he continues with bishop to a6, knight to d5, c6, knight on g to e7, bishop to a3, rook to e8, rook on f to c1, knight to c7, bishop to f1, knight on e to d5, bishop to c5, rook to d2, rook takes on a7, rook to c8, bishop to d6, f5, e takes on f6, and plus and more, g takes on f6, bishop to h3, knight to b5, rook to d7, knight to b6. So if you look at this position, after 37 moves into the game, Carlsen is still having an advantage of +1.9. So in this position, Carlsen's rook is hanging and this bishop is being attacked by both this knight as well as the rook. And the problem is that once this bishop moves, then this rook will get attacked twice by this knight as well as this rook. Carlsen will continue with a brilliant move which is bishop to f4, allowing the knight to capture the rook. But once the knight captures the rook, then this rook will fall. Firouzja continues with rook takes on d7, c takes on d7, rook takes on c1 with check, bishop takes on c1, and knight takes on d7. So at the end of the trades, Carlsen and Firouzja is having equal amount of material and Carlsen is having a positional advantage of +1.7. And Carlsen continues with bishop takes on e6, knight to c5, bishop to c4, knight to d6, bishop to f1, king to g7, bishop to a3, knight on c to b7, bishop to g2, knight to c4, bishop to c1, knight to c5, bishop to f1, knight to e5, king to g2, knight to e4, bishop to b2, knight to d6, bishop to e2, knight to b7, f4, knight to f7, king to f3, knight to c5, king to e3, knight to d6, g4, knight to e6, bishop to a3, knight to f7, king to e4, h5, bishop to c4, knight on e to d8, g takes on h5, knight to h6, king to d5, knight to f5, bishop to d3, knight takes on h4, bishop to e7, knight to f7, king to e6, knight to g2, bishop takes on f6 with check, king to h6, f5, knight to f4 with check, king takes on f7, knight takes on d3, bishop to d4, king takes on h5, f6, knight to f4, king to e8, knight to g6, f7, king to g5, king to d7, king to f5, bishop to g7, king to g5, king to e6, knight to f4 with check, king to d6, knight to g6, king to d7, king to f5, king to d6, king to g5, king to e6. So if you look at this position after 76 moves into the game, match is back to balance again. Neither of them is having any sort of advantage. But Carlsen is having this dangerous pawn which is one square away from promotion. For now, knight is keeping an eye on that. But once this king moves away from this knight, then it will be difficult for the knight to defend that square. Here, the only continuation for this game changing a draw is to play knight to f4, keep on checking the king and not allowing the king to come back into the game. That is knight to f4 with check. So once king moves to e7, he can continue the knight to g6 with check, king to e6, and knight to f4 with check. So Ali Reza Firuzja can force the draw in this position. But in the game, Firuzja will play king to h5, and this is a blunder because now king can move to f6. Now this square is taken away by this king. This square is taken away by the bishop. So only square is for moving backwards, and then if the king moves backwards, the knight falls. This was the reason why king to h5 was a blunder. And Carlsen continues with king to f6, knight to f6, and Carlsen promotes in pawn into f8 equal to queen. King to g4. There is a forced mate in 20 moves for Magnus Carlsen. So the right continuation is bringing the king to f7, slowly trapping the king. But instead he will play king to e5, and this is a huge blunder because after this move there is a forced draw for Alireza Firuzja again, because Firuzja can now play knight to g6 and it will fork knight to g6, and this will fork both the queen and the king, and once the queen falls the match will end in a draw. So after this move Carlsen continues with king to e4, but Firuzja, due to time scramble, who is having just 5 seconds on the clock, he missed this fork and play knight to h4, and this is again another blunder, and now there is a forced mate in 5 moves for Magnus Carlsen, and it begins with king to f4 with check, king to h3, bishop to e5, king to g2, king takes on h4, king to f1, king to f3, king to g1, and king to e1, checkmate. But in the match, after this knight to h4 blunder, Magnus Carlsen doesn't have time to calculate this forced mate in 6 moves. Even after playing the knight to h4 blunder, it was Alireza Firuzja who manages to flag Magnus Carlsen and win the game, even after down on material. And the match between Team Magnus and Team Firuzja manages to win that game as well.